The city that never sleeps is alive with the hum of countless stories, but one particular morning, in the bustling streets of New York, a seemingly innocuous cafe becomes the backdrop for an extraordinary moment that would ripple across social media and leave everyone talking. At a corner table, Barron Trump, the reclusive and often misunderstood son of former President Donald Trump, is enjoying a quiet breakfast. Despite the public eye constantly on him, Barron has always chosen to lead a life outside of the spotlight, away from the pressures of politics and media scrutiny. But as fate would have it, this moment of calm would be shattered by the sudden eruption of a stranger who barges into the cafe, his face contorted with anger. The stranger's words are sharp, pointed, and aimed directly at Barron, his accusations loud enough to freeze the entire room. As tension mounts and the cafe goes deathly silent, the world watches, waiting to see how Barron will respond. What happens next defies all expectations. Instead of retreating or retaliating, Barron does something no one anticipates. A simple, but profound gesture that flips the narrative on its head. In the face of public vitriol, Barron chooses not to fight fire with fire. He doesn't respond with anger, nor does he retreat into silence. Instead, his response leaves the stranger and the entire cafe speechless. It's not just about how Barron handles the confrontation, it's about how this moment changes everyone who witnessed it, from the casual coffee drinkers to the viewers at home. Through a single act, Barron Trump redefines strength, grace, and maturity, showing the world that there is another way to confront conflict. But what was the real power behind Barron's actions? And what led him to handle the situation in such an unexpected way? This is the story of how one moment in a cafe would change not just the perception of a young man who had always been in the shadows, but how it left a lasting impact on everyone who witnessed it. The cafe is a modest one, nestled between towering buildings that frame the New York skyline like guardians of an untold story. Sunlight pours through the windows, casting soft shadows on the worn tables and mismatched chairs, each one telling its own tale of quiet mornings and conversations that drift like coffee steam. Barron Trump, dressed in a simple navy jacket and jeans, sits alone at a corner table, the papers in front of him untouched. His face is serene, the kind of expression that suggests he's lost in thought, far away from the bustling city around him. Despite being the son of a former president, Barron has always chosen to keep a low profile, avoiding the constant glare of the media. His life is not one of headline-making speeches or political maneuvering, but of solitude and quiet introspection. He's here for the same reason everyone else is, to enjoy a moment of peace, away from the world's prying eyes. But peace, as he's about to discover, is fleeting. The door of the cafe bursts open, and a man enters, his face contorted in a mix of anger and disbelief. He scans the room, his eyes locking onto Barron. The man's footsteps are heavy, purposeful, as if he's carrying an invisible weight. Without hesitation, he strides toward Barron's table. The room falls silent. The barista behind the counter stops mid-motion, his hand still on the espresso machine, eyes wide. The man's voice, loud and unmistakable, breaks the tension. "You're a disgrace," he shouts, pointing directly at Barron. The words hang in the air, a sharp, unwelcome disruption in the morning calm. "Do you think people forget who you are? What your family represents?" The man's tone is venomous, filled with years of frustration and anger, likely directed not just at Barron, but at everything he stands for. Barron's eyes don't flinch, his face a mask of calm. His hands, still resting on the table, betray no sign of distress. He's accustomed to public scrutiny, even the kind that comes with aggression. The cafe's patrons glance nervously between each other, unsure of how to react. They're witnessing something unusual, a confrontation between a young man whose name is known the world over and a stranger whose face no one recognizes. The tension builds, suffocating the room like thick smoke. For a moment, the man's words are the only sound, his voice rising with every passing second. "You think you're untouchable, don't you? You think you can hide behind that wall of privilege and power your family built." The air feels thick, almost suffocating, as if every second is stretching into eternity. But then, Barron speaks. His voice is soft, but the calmness in it carries an undeniable weight. "I understand you're upset," he begins, his gaze unwavering. There's no defensiveness, no sign of anger or irritation. His tone remains steady, as if he's responding to a casual conversation rather than an outburst. "I can't change your feelings, but I can offer you respect in this moment. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can talk about it without hate." The words are simple, yet they cut through the tension like a knife through fog. The stranger falters for a moment, his face tightening with confusion. He expected an argument, a sharp retort, something, anything, that would justify his rage. But Barron's calmness disarms him, leaving him momentarily speechless. For the first time, the man looks uncertain. The cafe patrons, who have been holding their breath, exchange glances. The power of Barron's words, so gentle yet so firm, begins to settle over the room. It's a subtle shift, but one that can't be ignored. Barron's ability to stand in the face of hostility, not with anger or resentment, but with understanding and poise, begins to change the atmosphere of the entire café. The man, still struggling to find words, takes a step back. His expression flickers, a mixture of guilt and realization passing over his face. He opens his mouth to speak again, but Barron cuts him off, his voice now a bit firmer, yet still respectful. We all have our reasons for the things we believe. But it's not my job to change your mind, and it's not your job to change mine. We can both choose how we react in this moment, and I choose peace. The words hang in the air, not as an argument, but as a quiet invitation. Barron doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't stand up or gesture wildly. He simply speaks, with the authority that comes not from being loud or forceful, but from being unwavering in his own self-assurance. The man's shoulders sag, the weight of his anger slipping away as if Barron's calmness has unraveled it. For a moment, the café is silent. And then, in a small, almost imperceptible shift, the man nods slowly, his head dropping. I didn't mean to. His voice trails off, barely a whisper. There's an apology there, unspoken but undeniable. Barron nods back, his expression unchanged. It's all right, he says softly, and the words are more than just a response. They are a release, a moment of understanding that transcends the confrontation. The stranger turns and walks out of the café, his posture more relaxed, as if the weight of his own anger has lifted. The patrons, who have been watching in stunned silence, slowly return to their own conversations. The barista resumes making coffee, though his movements are slower, as if processing the unexpected shift that just occurred. Barron takes a deep breath, his shoulders relaxing. The moment has passed, but the impact it has left will linger long after he finishes his breakfast. As he finishes his coffee, the weight of the encounter begins to settle in, and with it comes a sense of something rare, something unspoken but profound. Barron Trump, in that moment, chose not to react with anger or to retreat into the shadows. He chose something far more powerful: understanding, grace, and the ability to confront hatred with dignity. The tension in the café is palpable. The world outside seems to freeze as Barron's calm words settle into the room like a heavy mist. There's a profound stillness, the kind that precedes something monumental. The stranger, now standing there with his face twisted between anger and confusion, looks as if he's been stripped bare. He's no longer the aggressor, but a man searching for meaning in a moment he hadn't expected. Barron, who has spent so many years in the shadow of his family's name, now stands alone as an individual, a man not defined by his past or his name, but by the strength of his character. The café's patrons can't help but feel the weight of the situation. The quiet, unassuming young man who once existed on the periphery of public consciousness has just altered the course of this exchange. There's a brief flicker of hope in the eyes of those watching, a collective breath held, as if they've witnessed something both rare and precious, someone standing against hate without succumbing to it. The stranger stares at Barron for a moment, his chest heaving as if struggling to breathe. The words of accusation still hang in the air, but they feel smaller now, less significant. What he once thought was a battle to be won now seems like a confrontation with his own inner turmoil. Barron's words have shattered the illusion of conflict. "You don't know what you're asking for," the man mutters, his voice now tinged with an unsettling sadness. Barron doesn't flinch, doesn't react with anger or judgment. Instead, his eyes soften. "I don't need to know everything," he replies, his tone gentle but firm. "We all have our reasons, but they don't have to define us. What matters is how we treat each other in the end." There's a brief pause, the tension now shifting to something almost fragile. The café's silence stretches into something transformative, and for a split second, time itself seems to hold its breath. The stranger, his face crumpling with emotion, takes a slow step back. It's not a retreat, but a recognition of the truth in Barron's words. A flicker of understanding. He opens his mouth to speak, but the words catch in his throat. Finally he nods, the motion small but meaningful. I'm sorry," he murmurs, barely above a whisper. For a moment, Barron simply looks at him, his face unchanged, as if he's seen this transformation happen countless times before. With a quiet nod, Barron speaks again, his voice carrying no weight but the gravity of the moment. "It's all right," he says. And in those two words, something shifts, something that goes beyond forgiveness. There's a peace, a resolution that echoes throughout the room. The stranger, once filled with rage, now looks like a man who has seen the futility of his anger. He turns, walking slowly toward the door, his steps measured and less heavy. As he exits, the café seems to exhale, as if the collective tension has been lifted. The patrons, still in shock, begin to speak in low voices, as if not fully understanding what they've just witnessed. The barista, who has been frozen in place throughout the entire confrontation, begins to move again, slowly, deliberately, almost as if the world has shifted around him. Barron finishes his coffee, his expression as serene as it was before the incident. But inside, something has changed. Something unspoken but powerful lingers in the air, and it has nothing to do with the events that just transpired. It's the realization that Barron Trump, in a simple moment of grace, has done what no one expected. He's shown the world that true strength isn't about fighting back, it's about knowing when not to. And in that understanding, he has become something more, something far greater than a name or a legacy. As the stranger exits the cafe, the heavy door closing behind him with a quiet thud, the world outside begins to feel a little lighter. The patrons who had once been held in the grip of uncertainty now look around, their faces etched with an unspoken realization. They had witnessed something powerful today, not just a moment of confrontation, but a transformation. In the space of a few words, Barron Trump had done more than diffuse tension. He had offered a glimpse into the heart of humanity, a reminder of what it means to approach conflict not with fear or anger, but with grace and understanding. In a world often divided by opinions and ideological clashes, Barron's choice to meet hostility with dignity left an indelible mark. The energy in the cafe is no longer thick with judgment or resentment, but filled with a quiet, lingering sense of possibility. The barista, who had been frozen in place just moments ago, now moves with purpose, his hands steady as he prepares drinks for the remaining customers. The hum of conversations starts to return, but there's a difference in the air. People are speaking with more care, more awareness of their surroundings. It's as if the encounter has opened their eyes to something bigger than themselves, an invitation to act with kindness, to listen instead of react. Barron finishes his coffee slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. He doesn't rise with a fanfare, nor does he bask in any recognition. In fact, he doesn't seek recognition at all. His quiet, dignified demeanor speaks volumes, not because of his family name, but because of the values he chooses to live by. As Barron stands and prepares to leave the cafe, a few patrons glance his way. There are no cheers, no applause, just a few nods, a silent acknowledgement of the profound impact he has had on them in this brief, quiet moment. Barron doesn't seem to notice. His focus is not on the outward recognition, but on the simplicity of living his truth. He walks out of the cafe, and with each step, the atmosphere changes just a little more. People watch him go, and in that moment, they are reminded of their own choices. In a world that often feels like it's spinning out of control, Barron's calm presence is a reminder that peace, understanding, and compassion are within reach. We don't need to fight to make our voices heard. We don't need to respond to every challenge with aggression. Sometimes, the greatest power lies in choosing not to react with anger, but with a quiet strength that doesn't seek to dominate, but to elevate. The man who had once stormed into the cafe with fire in his eyes has walked away, but Barron's actions have left him, and everyone else in that room, with a new perspective. Maybe we can all take a moment to ask ourselves, when faced with conflict, what choice will we make? Will we allow the fire of anger to consume us, or will we choose the path of understanding, even when it's difficult? The answer lies not in the words we say, but in the actions we take. As Barron leaves the cafe, the world outside feels a little quieter, a little more hopeful. The noise of division, the shouting and the anger, has faded into the background, replaced by something deeper, something more human. The encounter may be over, but its lessons will linger far longer. In the end, it is not the loudest voices that change the world. It is the quiet strength of those who choose peace, who refuse to be swept away by the storm of negativity, and who understand that real power lies not in force, but in compassion. Barron Trump, in that one moment of clarity, has shown us all a powerful truth, that we each have the ability to change the world around us, one small act of kindness at a time.